Having reserves through the winter is a good idea, and it will buffer you in case you have a vacancy and you have to pay the heat. And it will be a buffer in case you do get that unexpected no heat or frozen pipe call. At least with reserves, you won't be digging into your credit card or out of your savings to take care of an emergency. You'll have something set aside. Hey, what's up? This is Brian Lucier with another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, and I want to welcome on all my rock star real estate peeps, investors, property managers, landlords. These golden nuggets are put out there to help you increase the operations of your business that you can put into your tool belt and your toolbox and pull out when you need them to make you a more successful entrepreneur and real estate investor. Today, we're going to unpack financial reserves and why you need to do this, especially in today's market. So why do you need reserves? If you've been following our latest Golden Nuggets episodes, you'll know that our sentiment is that the market is shifting and changing. I just got off a call with an owner where we were discussing the shift in the summer market rental applications and now how that's being affected in the fall market and what we're seeing coming in. All of this, from my experience and in my opinion, are indicators of a market shift. As you've heard me say on previous podcasts lately over the past couple of months, this is my third market cycle, and believe it or not, rents will eventually have to come down. We can cover some of those strategies and topics on another episode, but for today, on today's podcast, I want to address financial reserves and why they're so important to you as a real estate investor. We're going to cover a couple different avenues why you should be considering these reserves and what they should be used for. The first I want to address is that rents may be going down. When, not if, rents go down, you'll need to have a strategy in place to cover the expenses for your property for an extended amount of time. We're already seeing over the past several months that vacancies are taking longer to fill, especially at the current market rents. We've been deflating our rents on a weekly basis to relieve pressure for the move-in hurdle to generate more traffic and interest in our rentals. Asking a first, last, and security deposit is a big barrier to entry for someone looking for a new apartment. Recently, our strategy has been to either drop the last month's rent or to reduce the amount of security deposit just to reduce the barrier of entry so someone can afford to move in to an apartment. Why all of this is important to you is because you may be finding you could be holding vacancies longer than normal at this time in the market. Historically, we've been running over the past 10, 15 years, 2 to 3% vacancy rates on our inventory for rentals over the past 15, 20 years. For the first time ever, we're seeing a spike in our rates of vacancies tip the scale at 8%. For me personally, this is alarming. We need to take steps immediately to address this situation, and that's some of what we're discussing here and in other podcasts. This is probably one of the largest reasons you should be holding financial reserves for your property. Typically, any property, any multifamily, or any other type of real estate investments, you should be holding 6 months to 12 months in reserves. This means you should have an escrow account set aside somewhere with the equivalent of half a year mortgage payments and expenses for the property. Hopefully, you'll never need to use it, but if you do need it, it won't peg you into a financial square hole burden that you can't get out of. One way to achieve this reserve is to take a percentage of your collected rent every month and just set it aside into an escrow account that you can't get your hands on. Just set it up, make the deposits, and leave it there. Then, when the time is right, if you need it, it will be there to bail you out. The worst case scenario is that it keeps accumulating and you don't need to touch it. When you get up to a year or maybe 8 months in reserves in excess, then it might be time to look at that escrow account and consider using some of that balance to invest in another rental property and add to your portfolio. The first reason for financial reserves is to weather market conditions, and we do now see the market changing. The second reason to hold reserves is because the weather, not the market. We're recording this episode October 1st, and if you don't know it, under Massachusetts Sanitary Code, heating season started already back in September on September 15th. That means that all of your heating systems should be underway to either getting checked out and scheduled for maintenance before we start hitting freezing temperatures. You don't want to find out you have faulty heating systems when everybody and their brother is having no heat calls and frozen pipe calls all at the same time. That could be a disaster. Also, trying to find available plumbers during prime heating season is always a challenge. Be preventive now with your maintenance, and if you haven't already, get your boilers, furnaces, and heating systems checked out by licensed, insured professionals to ensure that they're working properly before we get that first deep freeze. This advice goes hand in hand with your 6 to 12 months reserves. Here in New England, wintertime, rental property can be a very risky investment, especially if you have a vacancy and you need to pay the heat. If it's vacant, you should have that unit heated at least 50 to 55 degrees to avoid pipes freezing and costing you thousands of dollars of water damage, plumbing repairs, and tenant displacement into hotels under the guidelines of reasonable accommodations for a rental. Having reserves through the winter is a good idea, and it will buffer you in case you have a vacancy and you have to pay the heat. And it will be a buffer in case you do get that unexpected no heat or frozen pipe call. At least with reserves, you won't be digging into your credit card or out of your savings to take care of an emergency. You'll have something set aside. The next reason you want to have financial reserve is what's called capital expenses, where the old timers like me used to call that a sinking fund. So what's CapEx and what is a sinking fund? Often referred to as CapEx. These are the repairs at your property that usually have a predetermined lifespan before you need to replace them. Roofs, water heaters, appliances, carpets, flooring, anything at the building that will have a normal wear and tear lifespan are your potential CapEx expenses. How do you prepare for CapEx expenses? Well, a typical formula is to take the cost of the replacement and divide it by the years of use, then save that amount annually in anticipation for the repair. For example, if you have a kitchen appliance package that's going to cost you $12,000 and the lifespan is 10 years, this is just for an example, then you should be setting aside $1,200 a year for 10 years. Then at the end of 10 years, you'll have $12,000 saved up in reserves to make the purchase for the replacement of those appliances, again, without having to dip into your credit card savings account or your personal funds. You'll already have created a CapEx expense account or a sinking fund account to pay for these expenses before they come due. CapEx expenses, you got to plan them out, look at your property, and then set aside a percentage for your reserves from your collected cash flow. Those are the top 3 reasons you should consider financial reserves. I have a fourth reason for reserves, which is a little more uncommon, but recently ran into this with an acquisition of an apartment building. The scenario was this: we were purchasing an apartment building and all the rents were below market, considerably below market. The result was a debt income ratio that was under zero point 0.7. That's scary, horrible for a lender. If anybody who knows, a debt service coverage ratio for any lending institution right now is safely at 1.2.5%. That means the income of the property has to cover the debt mortgage 1.25 times, 1.25 times. This property was underperforming, so the bank forced a requirement of 6 months cash reserves for us to even obtain the mortgage. Yes, this dovetails with the first point of having cash reserves to cover vacancies, but the bank wanted to do this because they understood the debt service coverage ratio would not even support the mortgage after we purchased it. So to protect their interest in lending for the purchase of the property, the lender required us to set aside 6 months of reserves in an escrow account that we cannot even touch or have access to until we stabilize the property at 1.25% debt service coverage ratio. I know that this is an unpopular topic to be discussed. Most investors I know are stockpiling cash right now to purchase as many properties as possible to build their portfolio. As a younger investor, I followed that same path, and I got into trouble when I had too many vacancies and unstabilized buildings. I can tell you from my experience, it was not always the best move. When the market is hot and there's properties to be bought, it's very tempting to load up the truck and buy everything you can get your hands on. The risk is not having enough reserves and having an unstabilized property that can't support the mortgage or expenses. Multiply that number by several properties that you're not carrying reserves for, and you can find yourself in deep, deep trouble fast. So what can you do? My advice would be look at all of your properties you're currently managing or renting or own. Figure out what your monthly expenses are. Then figure out a way to take a percentage of your profits from your cash flow, however large or small, whatever the amount is, and set them aside into an escrow account to fill the 3 buckets we mentioned above. First would be your 6 to 12 months reserves. Second would be your emergency funds, especially for the winter in New England, for frozen pipes, no heat calls, and displacement of tenants. Third would be reserves for your CapEx expenses or items or systems that you'll need to be replaced at your property. Then finally, in the last box, as an investor, you may want to consider seriously building your portfolio. You may be finding off-market deals or other deals that are under market value rents under that debt income ratio. Be prepared for your lender to require you to hold financial reserves to cover the property until you get it stabilized. I hope you found this episode thoughtful and useful, although probably not popular with investors who are trying to accumulate and mass up a great number of properties in their portfolio. So please consider this. Reserves, financial reserves, are an important part of your investing strategy. Consider this a tool in your tool belt to be a successful real estate investor, property manager, landlord, or property owner. I hope you found this one useful. All my real estate rock stars, peeps, real estate investors, property managers, owners, and landlords. This is Brian Lucier from the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, Golden Nuggets, signing off, and we'll see you on the next one.